Welcome to Sports with Satz. I'm your host, Jack Satzinger. Joined this week by sports columnist David Nelson. Thanks for coming on, David.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
All right, so let's talk some Gophers hoops. They've played 7 games so far. They're 5-2. Only losses are to Louisville and St. John's. Their best wins easily are Georgia at Madison Square Garden, and they also beat Wake Forest earlier this week. But with that in mind, the rest of their non-conference schedule is pretty easy. They play some teams like Furman, Southern, Western Carolina, UNC Wilmington. They're going to be heavy favorites in all those games. But in these games, like Georgia, Wake Forest, Louisville, St. John's, against quality opponents, what do you think has stuck out in your mind that's been a strength for Minnesota?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been really surprised by so far through these 7 games has been the ball movement on the offensive side of the ball. You look at the stats they've been putting up. They rank 13th in the country in assists right now. They're obviously scoring a lot of baskets, good enough to win a couple of games. And, you look at some of the statistics the players themselves are putting up. You got a couple of guys in double figures. So for me, Jack, my big takeaway so far has been the ball movement on the offensive side of the court.
I definitely agree with that, David. Their shot selection hasn't been great all the time, and Richard Pitino knows it, but they've been making the extra pass. Joey King's excelled in that sort of a situation, and they've really been good at sharing the basketball. As far as my strength goes, it's got to be the Gophers' perimeter defense. Minnesota ranked 4th in the nation in steals per game earlier this week, and the rotation of DeAndre Matthew, Andre Hollins, Carlos Morris, and Nate Mason has really bothered opponents at times. Mason and Matthew have regularly been picking up opposing point guards full court. Hollins has improved his on-ball defense. And Morris, in that Wake Forest game, he racked up 8 steals. Seriously, 8 steals. That's pretty incredible in my book. All right, David, so now for the not-so-fun part. What's been your biggest weakness you've seen from these past few games?
Well, Jack, for me, one of the biggest weaknesses that I've seen so far from this Gophers team has been the inconsistency, and you really saw that in the New York NIT season tip-off, and really you looked at the way that they built up their first half leads, and they got off to phenomenal starts, but really kind of in that second half they started to lose control. Spoke with Mo Walker. He said that they were a little more conservative in the second half than aggressiveness, so you really got to watch for that, and hopefully during this weaker non-conference schedule that's something they can really pick up.
Yeah, David, I'd completely agree with that. That's been a sticking point in the Wake Forest game, too, where in the first half they built up some great leads, even a double-digit lead, but then were able to let the Demon Deacons back into the game. They were only up by 1 at halftime. For my weakness, I would look at the small forward position. Even before Daquan McNeil was indefinitely suspended last week, Minnesota was just really thin in there. Now there's absolutely zero depth. After starter Carlos Morris, really the backups are Andre Hollins and Nate Mason, who are 6'1 and 6'2, and then Charles Buggs, who comes off of the bench. And Buggs, he just oozes potential, but at the same time, he's not a complete player yet. He does not have much experience, and it's not good for the Gophers to have to rely on him to play big minutes at that position. So when they play Big Ten opponents like Nebraska, Wisconsin, that have some elite wings like Sam Decker and Teron Petaway, things could really get out of hand if Carlos Morris unfortunately gets injured or if he's in foul trouble. So for me, that's the big sticking point. In 7 games into the year, I'd say Minnesota's shown that they can do some really good things. Like you said, they share the ball well, and as I explained before, they've been great at pressuring teams.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're really thin at small forward. And at the same time, they just have been inconsistent for stretches. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how they respond, if Pitino can get them to improve on some of those weaknesses and carry those strengths throughout the whole season. But just 7 games in, they're obviously not a finished product. For David Nelson, I'm Jack Satzinger.